Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Andrew Moran, Sarah Calgill, Jeff Charles, and Dave Patterson. And this is the Conservative 5, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. In this week's C5 edition, Chipping Away at the Truth, join our panel as we discuss the Ukraine war, milestones, and money. Next, we'll fill you in on the Norfolk Southern debacle in The Fallout, toxic train derailment. Pivoting to tech, how do you feel about Big Brother keeping tabs in chipping away at liberty? Body chips, my goodness. And finally, we steer into a comical skit with Just for Fun, the President's Day Trivia Edition. All this and more coming up in this edition of the Conservative 5. It's now been more than a year since Russia invaded Ukraine, and Joe Biden decided it was time to make a surprise visit to President Zelensky and the folks in Kyiv. Of course, the stopover after his visit to Poland comes amid discontent in Washington from both Democrats and Republicans, who think spending another $500 million across the seas might be a bit unwise. Dave Patterson, you've been following the war in Eastern Europe for Liberty Nation. You know, Biden paid a lot of political capital for this visit. Do you think it was worth it?
Well, I think you have to think about Joe Biden in terms of, it may seem somewhat offbeat, but you know, they used to say about Yasser Arafat that he never lost an opportunity to lose an opportunity. And I think that that's what has happened with his speech in Poland. It was a motivational speech, and that was good. But it was a motivational speech right after, or coincidentally with, Russian President Putin's withdrawing from the New START agreement, which had serious ramifications and will in the future, because now we do not have the opportunity to do the inspections. At the same time, as you mentioned, he announced that $500 million more in weapons aid will go to the Ukraine. Listen, you know, Americans are always for the little guy and against the bully, but there has to be some end state. There has to be for us, what does winning look like, and when will that happen? It just can't be, as Congressman McCarthy said, it can't be an open checkbook.
Yeah, you know, I think the money's starting to really grind on people, Jeff, especially now with what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio. And Americans are starting to get a little miffed about all this spending over in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, there's the spending issue, Lisa, but it's also the fact that our spending is kind of helping to prolong this war. I mean, this past Sunday, they had the biggest anti-war rally in Washington, D.C. in a long time. I mean, and these were liberty-minded folks, libertarians. These were even folks on the left, too, people who are more Marxist, but they did agree on one thing. Continuing this war is not helping anybody, and it's not incentivizing either side to come to some sort of agreement. So there's that issue. And then, there is the money. I mean, we are still dealing with inflation. We're dealing with high grocery prices. I mean, this is not the time to be sending billions and billions and billions of dollars. I saw a meme on Twitter. It was satirical, but it was saying Ohio now identifies as part of Ukraine, hoping to get some money from the government. I've made a joke in the past, too. I made a joke saying that Black people are traveling to Ukraine because that's the way they can finally get reparations from the government. It's absolutely ridiculous. We shouldn't be able to make these jokes, but I think a lot of people see the absurdity in continuing this war that we have really not much to do with, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight.
Yeah, you know, you brought up a couple interesting points. Number one, the crazy politics of it all in the politics make strange bedfellows category. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to shamelessly promote Liberty Nation because we are the ones that put that meme on. So check out our conservative memes. But anyway, speaking about money, we have to go to Andrew, our economics correspondent up there from his perch in Toronto. How much have you guys coughed up, by the way? Let me ask.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. But I think, yes, the taxpayer dollar is also important. But look at the private sector money that's also going to Ukraine. I remember when the war broke out on this program, we discussed how one of the successes that Zelensky is going to enjoy was that it's going to be a capital haven after the war. So one of the things that the government did was that established a $750 billion fund to track all this capital investment from private sectors. And what has happened since then? You had Nestle announce a $43 million new production facility. The private investment arm of the World Bank launched a $2 billion package to support the private sector in Ukraine. You had a green investment fund announce an initial $500 million as part of a larger $100 billion fund. So all this money, public money and private sector money, is just going into Kiev. And once this war is over, if you want to be woke, if you want to get a high ESG score, you're going to say, yeah, I'm investing in Ukraine. I'm hiring workers. I'm making facilities. I'm setting headquarters there. So overall, Ukraine's going to financially benefit heavily once this war is over. But the main thing is that will the corruption be the worst of them and will actually deter longer term investment?
That's a good point. But Sarah, I can't remember a time, I really can't, when the optics were so bad for a president. I mean, Trump goes out to East Palestine and Tulsi Gabbard is there. And, Joe Biden is tripping up the steps of Air Force One trying to get to Poland. It's just really a bad political optic.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's a short hop in Marine One to go from the White House to East Palestine. It's less than 500 miles, but he'll, go 5,000 miles for, he just ignores everything under his own nose. And I'm not sure why this administration is like this. They just, keep kicking the can down the alleyway and hope for the best outcome. They hope the media is going to cover for them. They're, depending on some kind of global love instead of people in their own country. You don't want to see more billions of dollars going to a war overseas. And when you've got, several issues here that are ridiculous, obviously inflation. How about the homeless problem? How about East Palestine, the cleanup? That's not for just the railroad to do. They have people that need to come in and they haven't. They've not been on site. So I don't understand how, they just, oh, that's not our problem. Well, why not? It's here. It's within our borders. It is our problem. It is this government's problem. And they just keep running away from everything that they're faced with.
Well, Jeff, I see you nodding your head, and I totally agree with Sarah. And I thought it was interesting the next day, he tried to make a few phone calls to East Palestine. But Sarah, you made the point in your article, and it was a good one. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump from the White House to East Palestine in Marine One. I mean,
it's half a day. It's a half a day total. Half a day total. Get on Marine One, you land. You walk around for 20 minutes, you get back on, you go. And that didn't happen.
And it's a political no-brainer, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I wrote in my article that Trump was going out there, mm-hmm. and that Biden might want to harken back to the days of Jimmy Carter, who at the time of this recording is languishing in hospice, and we pray for him.
We do.
But let me just say that he made a terrible mistake when he was running for re-election. He went on an extended overseas tour. Pat Caddell was standing in Washington, screaming on the phone, tell the president to get back home, tell him to get back home. And Jimmy Carter got slaughtered by Ronald Reagan. And that makes me wonder, Jeff, do you think Biden's deciding to hold off on announcing for president has anything to do with the optics of what's going on?
And that's a good point, Lisa. That might be why, because Biden has been a politician since the Stone Age. He knows better than this.
Fred and Barney voted for him.
Yeah, why would he think it's a good idea to go overseas when there's an issue right at home, right in his backyard? It boggles my mind, and that just even further solidifies my prediction that he is not running for a second term, because nobody who is running for a second term would make such a rookie mistake.
It's not a rookie mistake for a globalist.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to make that same point, Dave. I'm glad you picked up on that, because that is not a rookie mistake. If that is that's your end game.
Or perhaps you realize the air is so toxic that at his age, it would be just terrible for him to step off Marine One and head into East Palestine.
Well, he couldn't walk up the stairs in Poland. Come on.
Yeah, he fell up the stairs.
He fell up the stairs.
Well, I think this whole thing with Ukraine is getting on Americans' last nerve with this toxic spill. Between the money and the emphasis, I think Americans are are good people. They're very sorry for what's going on in Ukraine, but they kind of feel like we're spending money we don't have, right, Andrew?
Exactly. You have a $32 trillion national debt, $1.5 trillion federal deficit, $200 trillion unfunded liabilities and expenditures. Where's all this money going from? Well, where's the money going to come from? Well, of course, taxation, printing, and borrowing. You're borrowing money from China and Japan to give it to Ukraine. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, no one really wants to fund a war overseas, but here we are, picking a team, sending resources. We'll stay on top of this and keep you posted. Thanks so much, panel. Within the span of 2 weeks, the Norfolk Southern Railroad experienced 2 derailments. This type of train jumping the tracks is not that uncommon until you add in a toxic chemical spill, and then things get a bit dicey. The derailment in Palestine, Ohio, has been used by Republicans to attack the president and the Secretary of Transportation, but is it warranted? I want to start off with Jeff, talk about the political optics, and then shift to Dave for an analysis of what happened and why.
Yeah, the optics ain't good for Biden, but they are good for Trump. I mean, Trump has capitalized on the situation. I mean, and we've talked about this. I mean, Biden chose to go overseas when he has a crisis in Ohio, and he hasn't bothered to show up. He hasn't said much about it. They've even been kind of struggling to get money from FEMA. Meanwhile, Trump said, yeah, I'll go to Palestine. I'll go to East Palestine. I'll go to Ohio. And he did. But I think this is even more significant than it seems, because this is kind of Trump starting to hit his stride a little bit. I mean, he announced last year, and it's kind of been low key since then, which isn't his normal style. He's released some videos, but hasn't done a lot of rallies. He showed up. He went to McDonald's. He bought McDonald's for everybody in the restaurant. He bought McDonald's for law enforcement, for the fire department. We all know the man loves McDonald's. And he said what he needed to say. Savannah Hernandez, a journalist, interviewed him and said, and she asked President Trump, you know, what message do you have for Joe Biden right now? And Trump said, get over here. Yeah. Perfect. That was brilliant. So politically, bad for Biden, great for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, how hard is this? I mean,
it's not hard. Biden should have been there all along.
It's politics 101.
Oh, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But I'm going to let Dave speak to some of that politics 101. On my end of it, you know, it's 2 years out. So I have to say, when you're doing a presidential race, it's grueling. And I don't see him going to spend all of his energy and capital in the first few months. So lethargic, call it what you want. He's just pacing himself. And that's what he has to do in order to go to the finish line. So that is my one comment on why Trump seems to be, you know, just kind of hanging around in the ether. The other thing is East Palestine is a little rural area, really close to the Pennsylvania border. And these people have been hammered. They don't have resources to deal with this. And Trump shows up. He makes a few phone calls. His kid makes a few phone calls. And they have cleaning supplies coming down from Michigan, you know, all paid for, ready to go. They have truckloads of water coming. Trump brought him on his plane with him. He's out there shaking hands with everybody and talking to people. And you can hear the crowd from a distance yelling, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. We love you, President Trump." And, you know, it would be nice if anybody from the feds would show up and act like they give a darn about, you know, small town in Ohio that voted for Trump. It'd be nice if they cared.
Yeah, it was really shocking, Dave, when I first heard that FEMA said no to the people in East Palestine. Now they've done a volte-face on that and they've changed it around. And then there's been the Secretary of Transportation who's been sloth-like slow in responding to this. I mean, he put out a harshly worded message a day ago, and now he says he's going to drop on in. Well, it's been 2 weeks. What does this say to the people of Palestine?
Well, what it says is that this administration is late to need, or if they're at all, ever. Their crisis management is the worst in history. But, you know, think about it. This event took place on February 3rd, 20 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody mentioned it. The media didn't mention it for almost a week until Liberty Nation came out with a story on it. This is really an incredible statement about how this administration makes decisions. Late to need, if at all. Now,
well, they don't rescue anymore. They just wait, and then they go directly to recovery. They don't care about the rescue part anymore. They just go to recovery, clean up. We're going to clean it up after it's all said and done. But there are people in need there, and that just irritates the dickens out of me.
Now think about that in terms of national security. This has
yeah.
been the hallmark of this administration. They were late to need, dithering and screwing around with Afghanistan. They did the same thing in Ukraine. They didn't bother to do anything for a year before the invasion. In fact, in June, if you'll recall, when the big summit between President Biden and President Putin in 2001, everybody was all excited. What happened? Biden went away from that meeting and stopped all aid to Ukraine until November.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. That's a good point, Dave.
And this has just been what this administration has been about. And yet here we are trusting them in a world where Russia has now said they're pulling out of the New START treaty. China is making great overtures to Russia. This nation is in extremis and needs to understand that.
Andrew, let's look at the dollars and nonsense. What we got going on here is Buttigieg says in his strongly worded letter that Norfolk Southern better get on the stick. They better clean this up. But meantime, the CEO of Norfolk Southern was there like the day before he even spoke and said, we're really sorry. We take responsibility for this.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say something. I do believe, and maybe Andrew, I do believe that while the trains are Norfolk Southern's, all the tracks in the United States of America are owned and run and operated by the federal government. Am I correct in that? Does anybody know?
Yes, that's partially true, and a lot of them is dilapidated, and it's frustrating though because for the right, they always say, Biden's spending billions of dollars in Ukraine, and then they complain about this bipartisan infrastructure law that would spend hundreds of billions of dollars on infrastructure in the United States. So that's the balancing act that the right has to pay. There was a comment that Dave made about national security. I think there are many components that people are missing that all over the country. There are these toxic chemical incidents transpiring that's going into the air. In Tucson, Arizona, in the last week, there was a shelter in place because there was a toxic chemical leak. There was a massive fire recently in a warehouse storing plastic plant pots in Florida and resulted in hazmat teams monitoring the air quality. There was a metal manufacturing plant in Ohio that there was an explosion. There was another trail derailment carrying toxic chemicals in Michigan. There was another trail derailment in Houston, also carrying toxic chemicals. So you have to, and then, there's so much going on from Hawaii to Texas, Louisiana. There's so much going on. It makes you wonder what is happening. I mean, is there a deliberate sabotage act happening? Is everything just dilapidated in the infrastructure? Is there a foreign player involved? It's just everything's happening simultaneously in just a 1 month span. It makes you start asking questions and asking why this is occurring. Maybe Dave can allude to that, but this is it's mind-numbing it's befuddling to watch of what's transpiring.
I think one of the statistics that echoes what you're saying, Andrew, is that there have been more electric grid attacks in this year than ever before.
So are you suggesting then that that opens a can of worms then?
No, what I'm saying, I'm kind of,
Let's just stick with the facts and skip the conspiracy theory.
He's saying, who's John Galt?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I do know that, the railroad, Norfolk Southern, they're a tier 1 railroad, and they do have their own responsibilities, and they run right through the tiny little rural part of my world, and they are Johnny on the spot. If there is anything going on, if there's anything with the tracks, or they're right there. So I do know there's a difference between the tier 1 tracks and the other tracks that they have to cross. So I'm not saying that it's anybody else's fault, but I do know that they're there, and even though they're getting booed and treated like crap, I do have a good contact within the railroad, and it's like, it's not so much the government's fault. It's the government's lack of response to the situation. And that's
Sarah,
what the railroad people are saying, that Trump showed up and they are bless him. He's there to help take a little bit of heat from them. So that's what I know from that angle.
You're right. I mean, you've really put your finger on it. The response is always, oh, it's private industry's fault. And I'm not saying that Norfolk Southern is clean on this, but I'm just saying that the tracks are taken care of by the feds. They can't wait to point the finger at the private industry. Private industry showed up before Biden even called, before Buttigieg even wrote his letter. Let's just say this. This toxic spill is also a political mess too. Mm-hmm. And I think there's going to be a lot of cleanup being done on aisle 9 around East Palestine.
Or aisle 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Well, the administration is already blaming Trump for what happened, because they say that he deregulated parts of the train industry that led to this incident. But even though they could have just reversed that because they had control of the White House, Senate, and Congress for about 2 years, and they still control
neither of those things had anything to contribute to what the accident was in itself. Train derailments happen. I mean, they do. They're not always toxic. When they are, that's when they make the news. But they do go off the tracks periodically for a whole bunch of reasons, mostly infrastructure reasons, mostly, track problems. But, in this case, they spilled something that was really bad. And that's why there needed to be a better response to it.
To your point, Sarah, in 2022, there have been 800 derailments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's common. It is not uncommon. You just don't hear about them because they don't cause loss of life. They don't impact communities like this. They don't have that toxic spill in the air. And that's why, it's pretty common, but it's uncommon. It's like a fender bender versus, a 14-car pileup on the interstate.
And while we've been talking,
because of the situation, I'm laughing not because of the situation, but because I've already read my clothes. We're wildly over time. Say goodbye, guys. Bye.
Goodbye.
We've been using microchips for decades as clothes tags on debit and credit cards, and to help identify and return lost pets, computers, and more. But now companies are beginning to chip away at their employees. Tech giants see placing a chip in an arm or leg of an employee as a way to make life easier for everybody. After all, why not just wave at the vending machine and snag a Snickers bar without forking over the dough? Sarah, liberty issues abound. So what on earth could possibly go wrong?
Gee, I don't know. Maybe they can tap into your bank accounts. I mean, they're asking people to hook their little chips up, in between, like right here, between the thumb and the forefinger. And that's where they're implanting these chips for the most part. And so people can walk up and do this and get a Snickers or get let into their office building. It's like when people chop off fingers to use your finger to open a door. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that these chips are helpful. The problem is if they get to the point where it's commonplace and they're attaching, like in certain companies, in the company up in Michigan, gosh, I wish Andrew will know exactly who I'm talking about. They implanted chips voluntarily. People just did it. And they implanted chips in these people and hooked it into their payroll system. So every time they waved their hand at the vending machine, that came off their check. And that's okay. But what if it goes crazy and all of a sudden, you're just walking by the vending machine every day and you don't wave your hand, and at the end of the month you've spent $3,000 on Doritos. There's so many problems that can arise from this, and the Big Brother aspect. And guess what? It's chipped. They can hack. Anybody can hack into this technology. This isn't, just like they steal from your debit card. So there's so many ways this could go wrong. And I know there's a reason that so many states have banned the use of mandatory chipping. There's probably 16 or 17 states. Alabama is the most recent that is trying to pass legislation. They'll join Colorado and Arizona and Indiana and some other places that just say, no way, we're not doing this.
Andrew, isn't this why God made wristbands? I mean, why do you have to implant something in a person's body? That seems to be going really far afield.
Well, if anyone read my 2015 book, The War on Cash, you would see that I expected all of this to happen.
Gosh, that was shameless, Andrew. That was shameless.
Well,
That was
there's a lot of this in the Bible too, if you want to really go back far.
Mark of the Beast. Mark of the Beast.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
on the I can understand on the private sector, this is a great idea because all these companies have developed heartbeat payments, they developed wrist payments, credit card wristbands, all these different ways. And it's a great way to encourage you to spend more money without just even thinking about it. The problem is, and Sarah alluded to this, is the big brother aspect of all of this. I mean, right now, you and I discussed about this, Lisa, off camera before, and you have the rise of the central bank digital currencies. You're having the digitization of money. And this war on cash is going to erase many people's freedoms. You saw this during the Freedom Convoy in Canada. Trudeau, he just froze people's bank accounts. And in the future, if you're not obeying what the government is saying, whether it's vaccines, protesting, whatever the case, government's just going to shut down your account, prohibit you from participating in commerce because more people are chipped. It's benign right now because it's only a handful of companies, but overall in the future, it's going to be ubiquitous. And China, the United States, Europe, they're all going to have this technology and say bye to your freedoms.
Jeff, they've got something going on with firearm sales too. Like, in other words, if you put it on your debit card, it's going to be reported or something along that line, I think.
Yeah, all I have to say is, who's that writing? John the Revelator wrote the book of the seven seals. Yeah, the rapture's going to happen like any minute now. You guys stole my talking point, but I'm sorry. This is the mark of the beast. I'm telling you, it's already been predicted in Revelations. But I mean, Andrew's right. I mean, there are so many ways that we probably couldn't even imagine how the government could violate our rights by using this tracking system. And you're right, Lisa, about them monitoring gun sales. Yeah, that's by design. That's their way of creating a gun registry without creating a gun registry. It'll be done by the private sector at the behest of the government instead of the government doing it directly. They're already developing technology that would allow you to have your ID in your phone, kind of like how you have your cards when you go to pay for stuff. So yeah, that is where this is going. And it's funny because, like Andrew, I foresaw this happening anyway, but it wasn't just what we see in the world. It's also been predicted. I know I'm not trying to be the prophet Jeff Isaiah here. I kind of am, but this is where things are going, and it's going to get even scarier and scarier. Just wait until they want you to have those chips in your hand or in your forehead. I'm just saying.
Well, Dave,
Elon Musk has already developed the technology and the chips in your brain with Neuralink. He's already developing that. I mean, right now, it's not bad, but it's gonna be abused in the future by the states somehow.
Dave, have you had your brain chipped yet?
No, I haven't. But I am in the waiting line for that. If they can put more hair on the one side of my head, that would be good.
And
you might as well have a multicap,
neurons, right? Implant young neurons.
Right, but the thing that Jeff brings out is he's thinking about things in the future. The fact is that these things have happened now. We found out that when our troops were in Iraq, that everybody had these really cool Fitbit things on their wrists. And they would be running around, the perimeter of the base until somebody said, I can track you with your Chinese-made wrist as you run around the perimeter of the base. You got to get rid of that. And then they found that there were a lot of other things that had Chinese chips in them that could be tracked, and in fact were.
Actually, I may say one thing very quickly. I have to apologize to Scott D. Cosenza, our legal affairs editor, but cryptocurrency is another great tracking device as well, despite all its claims of being anonymity. That's another way to track you if you talk about Fitbits, credit cards, crypto. Sorry, Scott.
I hadn't thought about that. Well, it's interesting that even the scientists who promote chips don't want to have them implanted. What a world we live in. Thanks for watching. It's all about the presidents today, folks. We spent a week poring over presidential weird facts for our game of trivia in this edition of Just for Fun. We've had several very interesting leaders and one or two dry as a bone. But let's see if the panel can determine who said what. Folks at home, play along and see how you do. Okay, I'm just going to throw this out to the panel, I think. And the first one who's got the right answer, Jeff, can you keep score?
Yes.
The winner gets a free bourbon at our next advance if we can ever decide where that's going to be.
Okay, then I'm going to cheat.
All right, here we go. Everyone listening, fingers on buzzers. Which president had 15 children? Was it Rutherford B. Hayes, John Tyler, or John Adams?
John Adams.
Tyler.
Correct. Very good, Sarah. How did you know that? But actually,
Well, because it's a multiple choice.
Well, Jeff, John Adams wasn't a bad choice. He had quite a few kids, but not 15.
Wow.
So, all right. Question number 2. Who was our shortest president in height at 5'4"? Was it A, James Madison, B, James Monroe, or C, John Adams? Our shortest president at 5'4".
John Adams.
Oh, you keep guessing Adams.
Monroe. Okay, well, let's see. What would it be then?
The answer is James Madison. That was a tough one because we've had quite a few short presidents. All right, number 3. Who was ticketed for riding his horse too fast? Ticketed by the police, I gather. A, Abraham Lincoln, B, Ulysses S. Grant, or C, John Polk?
Grant. Ulysses S. Grant.
You are correct, sir.
Yep.
Lots of applause for Jeff. Okay.
John Polk was the second best president ever.
What? Second best president ever. Okay, we'll talk about. We'll talk about all right. Question number 4. Who gambled away a set of White House china? Was it A, Theodore Roosevelt, B, Warren G. Harding, or C, Ronald Reagan?
I'm going to say Harding because he's my third favorite president.
It's Harding.
Actually, I've read quite a few books on Harding, and it is Warren G. Harding. Very good, Andrew. A win for Andrew there.
Teapot Dome scandal. That's I make the connection.
Okay, yeah, he was into China here. Okay, number 5, which president officially filed a UFO sighting? Was it A, Jimmy Carter, B, FDR, or C, JFK?
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
Oh, Andrew.
Andrew.
That's impressive. All right, fingers on the buzzers here. Here we go. Which president funded his first political campaign with poker winnings? Was that Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, or LBJ?
LBJ.
I'm going to say Nixon.
You
Yes,
are correct, Andrew. I would have said LBJ, and Tim said LBJ, but it was.
I would have thought LBJ too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was tricky. Number 7. Which president was arrested for running over a woman while riding his horse? Oh, okay. A, Grover Cleveland. B, William Howard Taft. C, Franklin Pierce.
Taft.
Wait, what did you say, Jeff?
Taft.
You both said Taft?
Yeah.
You want to come in with something else, Dave or Sarah?
Pierce.
You're right. Dave wins that one.
Taft no horse could hold Taft.
I was going to say,
I forgot about that.
Say he might have been in a big old wagon, but he wasn't on a horse.
300 plus pounds.
Well,
Yeah.
they thought Taft was
Short
a horse.
legs.
That's what happened.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I was going to say, I've never
Nice
seen
recovery.
Taft on a horse in any picture.
No, he's huge.
All right, number 8. Which U.S. president had the telephone number 1? Was it A, Woodrow Wilson, B, Rutherford B. Hayes, or C, William Henry Harrison?
The first one. What's his name? Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson. Yeah.
Hayes.
Hey, Sarah is right. Give one to Sarah here.
He's also the first president that ever had a phone.
And made a call.
And he was his phone number was 1.
What year was he president? That's why I thought Wilson, because he seemed to be the.
Well, that's why I put Woodrow Wilson in to mix you up, because Woodrow
Yeah,
Wilson.
we're just trying to throw you off the scent.
Rutherford B. Hayes was president before Woodrow Wilson. We can
Yep.
say that. All
And he
right.
didn't screw up the world.
And William, I wanted somebody to guess.
Did
William,
not screw up the world.
Yeah, I wanted somebody to guess William Henry Harrison because he died in 1841, and that would have been a really dumb guess. But anyway, number 9, I digress. Which president was once a model and was on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine? I can see Jeff at the top of his seat here. A, JFK. B, Bill Clinton. C, Gerald Ford.
JFK.
Who was the second
Clinton?
Bill Clinton or Gerald Ford?
one? Ford.
Ford.
You are correct.
Ford? What?
What do Canadians know about American presidents anyway?
He knows more than our guys do.
I know. That's why Okay, number 10. Last and final question. Everybody ready? Which president installed a putting green in the White House and played over 800 games of golf while in office?
Eisenhower.
You
Yep.
are correct.
Dang.
Very good. Okay, so that's our 10 questions. What do we got? 2 is the one. What do we got, Jim? Jeff?
Yeah, Andrew has 3. Everybody else has 2.
Andrew,
Yeah, gets the
you got
bourbon.
I
three.
knew you
What's
were going to
happening?
win U.S. president. Our friendly neighborhood Canadian beat all the Americans. Oh, what does that say for our education?
So the winner gets a case of Canadian beer, and the losers get 2 cases of Canadian beer.
The winner doesn't drink.
How about Canadian Club or Seagram 7? I believe the Brofmans are a product of Canada. Am I correct there?
How about Tim Hortons? Everyone gets a can of Tim Hortons coffee from Brazil.
All right.
We'll
we do
get you
like
something
our-
special.
We do like our history of government here at Liberty Nation. How many answers did you get right? You must have done better than our ragtag panel. Bye. Everybody say bye. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for our C5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, surf on over to libertynation.com. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank DiOrio, and our executive producer, Sarah Calgill. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief. Thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a production of libertynation.com, where truth matters.